October 7th, 1656, what began as a seemingly straightforward legal dispute in the Massachusetts Bay Colony swiftly unraveled into one of the most enigmatic and consequential episodes in early New England's colonial history. Joseph Parsons, a prominent merchant of Springfield and a man of considerable influence, initiated a slander suit against Sarah Bridgman, accusing her of damaging the reputation of his wife, Mary Bliss Parsons, 10 generations removed from the later acknowledged W.H. Linda McKim. The case, initially framed as a matter of defamation, quickly spiraled beyond the boundaries of conventional jurisprudence, though the court ultimately ruled in favor of the Parsons family, ordering the Bridgmans to pay a fine. This verdict was widely understood to be the result not of impartial justice, but of the behind-the-scenes maneuvering of John Pynchon, Joseph's business partner, magistrate, and scion of one of the region's wealthiest families. Pynchon's intervention, while securing a legal victory, inadvertently exposed fissures in the fragile social order, for the trial unearthed far more than mere gossip. In the course of the proceedings, a cascade of testimonies painted a disturbing portrait not of Sarah Bridgman but of Mary Parsons herself. Most striking was the account of John Matthews, a laborer who had once worked at the Parsons household. He recounted witnessing a domestic quarrel during which Joseph Parsons rebuked his wife, declaring she was led by an evil spirit. Mary's response shocked him. She claimed her afflictions began when Joseph locked her in the cellar, where she was besieged by spirits like puppets that no physical force could dispel. Even more alarming, she described walking across water without becoming wet, while Goodman Colton, who pursued her, emerged drenched. She confessed to suffering fits in which she wandered barefoot through marshlands in naught but her shift, only to awaken miles from home, with no memory of how she arrived. These revelations, sworn under oath, transformed the slander suit into something more ominous, an informal inquest into witchcraft. The court, now uneasy and bound by precedent, summoned Mary Parsons to answer for her alleged dealings with the supernatural. To prevent her arrest, Joseph was required to post a bond, a humbling reversal for a man who had entered the courtroom as the aggrieved party. Mary, incensed by the accusation and the public scrutiny, viewed the proceedings not as justice, but as a grievous violation of her honor. In a moment steeped in folklore and fury, she is said to have pronounced a curse upon the colonial government, a hex condemning the Puritan theocracy to ruin, misfortune, and internal collapse. Whether by coincidence or consequence, just 7 days later, on October 14, 1656, the General Court of Massachusetts Bay enacted draconian legislation targeting Quakers, branding them a cursed sect of heretics. These laws, unprecedented in their severity, mandated fines, imprisonment, public whippings, and even mutilation of ears for harboring Quakers. By 1658, the penalty had escalated to death. The executions of William Robinson, Marmaduke Stevenson, and notably Mary Dyer on Boston Common turned the Quakers into martyrs and provoked outrage across the Atlantic. King Charles II, alarmed by the colony's excesses, intervened in 1661, commanding an end to the killings and asserting royal authority over colonial governance. This clash between Puritan religious absolutism and the Crown's insistence on civil order highlighted a growing contradiction. A theocratic regime that justified its cruelty in the name of divine purity was increasingly at odds with emerging principles of tolerance, liberty, and human dignity. Mary Parsons' curse, whether literal or symbolic, seemed to herald this unraveling. The very measures taken to consolidate power instead sowed the seeds of its downfall. The autocratic instincts of the Puritan elite alienated not only the crown but also settlers who yearned for greater freedom, planting the ideological roots of resistance that would, over the next century, culminate in the American Revolution on April 19, 1775, and the formal Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776. Yet the story of Mary Parsons did not conclude with the 1656 judgment. Though legally vindicated, her name remained shadowed by suspicion. Over the following years, Joseph prospered, their children thrived, and the Bliss family extended their influence along the Connecticut River Valley. But whispers of witchcraft clung to Mary like a second skin. Then, in July 1674, the past erupted anew. Mary Bartlett, the 22-year-old daughter of Sarah and James Bridgman, long-standing adversaries of the Parsons, died suddenly shortly after giving birth. Her husband, Samuel Bartlett, and her father jointly accused some unlawful and unnatural means of causing her death, implicating Mary Parsons as the agent of dark arts. When the Hampshire County Court convened on September 29th to examine the claims, Mary, aware of the rumor, presented herself voluntarily. The court heard testimony, examined evidence, and then, inexplicably, deferred judgment. A second delay followed in November, cited only as being for special reasons, a phrase that echoes ominously in the historical record, suggesting political pressure, fear, or perhaps the silent hand of influence. On January 5, 1675, the court reconvened for its most extensive hearing. Depositions were reviewed, new witnesses possibly heard, and both Samuel Bartlett and Mary Parsons appeared once more. But then, silence. The detailed records of this proceeding have vanished, leaving only docket summaries. Mary was once again, despite strong evidence due to the intervention by powerful allies like Pynchon, acquitted. The fine details of the case simply dissolved, as though certain parties did not wish for the various details and facts of the case to be made known. The erasure of evidence all point to the intentional tapering with evidence and records. Mary Bliss Parsons, the woman who was both victim and accused, legal plaintiff and suspected witch, remained beyond the reach of final judgment. Her legacy, like her curse, lingers in the margins of history, a harbinger of the tension between power and justice, faith and corruption, that would evolve to define a nation's birth. When Mary was called to speak for herself during her trial in 1675, she steadfastly asserted her innocence, invoking divine judgment. How clear she was of such a crime, and that the righteous God knew her innocence, with whom she had left her cause. Her words, measured and resolute, rang through the tense courtroom of Northampton, where local magistrates, though recognizing that final jurisdiction rested with the Court of Assistance in Boston, resolved to investigate thoroughly. Citing the season and the remoteness of their own court from the colonial capital, they undertook what they described as their utmost duty in inquiring into the case. Among the most chilling episodes of this inquiry was the appointment of a committee of sober, chaste women to conduct a body search for marks of witchcraft, a practice rooted in the belief that witches bore physical signs, often invisible to the untrained eye. The results of this examination were recorded only as an account, one the court chose not to disclose. This deliberate silence raises enduring questions. Why was such critical evidence withheld? Was it deemed too incriminating to be made public? All known documents, save the body search report, were eventually forwarded to Boston, where Mary was brought on March 2, 1675, and formally indicted by a grand jury. The charge was dire. Mary Parsons, the wife of Joseph Parsons, being instigated by the devil, hath entered into familiarity with the devil and committed several acts of witchcraft. 10 weeks later, on May 13th, the trial commenced before an imposing bench of magistrates, including the governor, deputy governor, and 12 assistants, among them John Pinch and her husband's close friend, ally and business associate. The atmosphere must have been electric with tension as the indictment was read and evidence presented. Yet the court record reduces this climactic moment to a stark, emotionless line. The prisoner at the bar, holding up her hand and pleading not guilty. The jury brought in their verdict. They found her not guilty, and so she was discharged. Mary was free, but the implications of her trial rippled far beyond her personal vindication. Remarkably, Mary had first been accused of witchcraft decades earlier, on October 7, 1656, during a period of intense religious and political anxiety in the colonies. It was then, some claim, that she cast a powerful hex upon the Puritan establishment, an act of spiritual defiance that seemed to inaugurate a chain of portentous events. In July 1674, the very month of her second accusation, two eerie phenomena occurred, one in the New World, one in the Old. Events that contemporaries interpreted as omens of divine disfavor. In Plymouth Colony, a child, a boy, was born with two heads, a grotesque anomaly that sent waves of dread through Puritan communities. Interpreted as a sign of unnatural disorder, the birth was seen by many as a dark omen against the moral authority of the colonial regime. Almost simultaneously, across the Atlantic, workmen renovating the Tower of London unearthed a wooden chest 10 feet beneath a staircase, containing the skeletons of two young boys. Identified by popular belief as the long-missing princes in the tower, Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, their remains were reinterred in Westminster Abbey by order of King Charles II. Yet even as the monarchy was restored, the discovery was viewed not as a triumph, but as a grim portent, a spectral indictment of royal power and its historical crimes. The connection between these two events, the two-headed child in the colonies and the unearthed princes in England, lies not in mere coincidence, but in the symbolic weight they carried. Both were perceived as manifestations of a world out of balance, where hidden sins surfaced in terrifying forms. The colonial omen challenged the Puritan claim to godly governance. The English omen undermined the crown's legitimacy, suggesting that even restored monarchy rested on blood-soaked foundations. Crucially, it was under Charles II that colonial relations began to deteriorate. Royal policies grew increasingly intrusive, and the crown's authority was met with growing resistance. Over time, this friction eroded both Puritan theocracy and monarchical control, setting the stage for rebellion. Thus, when viewed through the lens of historical symbolism, Mary Bliss Parsons' alleged hex takes on an almost mythic, even so, a definitive significance. Her act of defiance and casting of a curse in 1656 stands as a catalyst, a spark lighting the fuse of colonial dissent. The strange births, the unearthed bones, the trials, the silences, all converge in a narrative where personal injustice becomes interwoven with national transformation. One might conclude, therefore, that the Revolution of 1775 and the Declaration of Independence in 1776 were not sudden eruptions, but the culmination of generations of suppressed rage, spiritual unrest, and the slow crumbling of authority. A chain of events, perhaps, set in motion by a woman, a witch who, concealed in the shadows of night in the basement of her home, cast a powerful imprecation directed against the very establishment who had dared to challenge and offend her with their impertinence.
It was on January 5, 2026, one Darius Radmanish, an author, historian, and genealogist, produced and released a video titled A Witch's 1985 Imprecation, a narrative long carried in silence, passed down like sacred scripture, yet shrouded in mystery. It is the story and true account of his late mother, the witch from Adair County, Missouri, USA, Linda McKim, a woman he knew not only as a parent but as a force of defiance and resistance. In 1979, following the Iranian Islamic Black Revolution, she and her family, her Iranian husband and two children Darius and her daughter Tina, were taken captive at gunpoint by some armed revolutionaries and placed under house arrest by the newly established Islamic Republic. For 8 years, they endured isolation, surveillance, and Linda in particular suffered a great deal of physical and emotional abuse and maltreatment by the new imposed establishment. But in 1985, 1 year before her perilous escape to America, she cast an imprecation, a curse, hex not born of malice, but of justice. Summoning ancestral strength and spiritual resolve, she, unknown to many including her husband and her children, was a witch. This natural-born practitioner of the art of witchery, this 10th great-granddaughter of the infamous witch of Northampton and the 1692 Salem witch trials, May Bliss Parsons. Linda one night while aloe as she was looking out her bedroom window on the 3rd floor, at the city of Isfahan that resembled a sea of flickering diamonds as the city lights twinkled in the night, Linda suddenly went into a deep and spectral trance. It was at this moment that she directed a hex toward the very foundations of Middle Eastern patriarchy, decreeing that one day, a great feminine awakening, revolution, shall rise, first against the Iranian state, then spreading out to the 4 corners of the region, shattering the chains of theocratic patriarchal tyranny. Now, as we bear witness today to the unfolding revolution in Iran, the mass uprisings, the defiant chants from rooftops, the courage of women burning headscarves in open rebellion against the repressive tyranny that has for nearly half-century bound them in the chains and shackles of servitude, we find ourselves standing at the precipice of a profound realization. Darius' mother's prophecy and curse, spoken in darkness so many years ago, is now materializing in daylight right before our very eyes. What began with the women, life, freedom movement in September 2022, after the murder of Mahsa Amini, has now blossomed into a full-scale national revolt against the Mullah regime, a movement defined and led by the fearless women of Iran. They are not merely demanding reform, they are dismantling a half-century of theocratic patriarchal oppression, and in doing so, they echo the very words of the witch Linda McKim's once uttered under house arrest, decades earlier. This is not a mere coincidence. Darius has long preserved evidence, copies of social media posts dating back to 2016, in which he first revealed his mother's 1985 incantation, detailing her vision of what was the imminent feminist uprising and revolution in Iran years in the future. At the time, this was before any thoughts or inklings were made about some great feminist or women's movement and revolution against the Mullah regime, as we have witnessed over the recent years. At first, when the details surrounding Linda's 1985 incantation was made public, it was dismissed as a poetic metaphor, myth-making. But today, as history unfolds before our eyes, the precision of her, Darius's mother's words cannot be ignored and dismissed. The timing, the symbolism, and the central role of women as vanguards of change each align with her curse and prophecy. And so we must ask, could a woman's curse, rooted in a lineage of witches and witchcraft, rage and ancestral memory, truly plant seeds that take generations to bloom? This brings us, of course, full circle back to another revelation: America's 1776 Revolution for Independence, the fruition of a witch Mary Bliss Parsons' 1656 hex. It is here where we explore what is unequivocally the astonishing continuity of a family's spectral gift and spiritual rebellion. The witch Linda McKim's 10th great-grandmother, Mary Bliss Parsons, the witch of Northampton and the infamous Salem witch trials, was first accused and tried for being a witch in October 1656, 320 years earlier. She was found to be not guilty by the courts, however, based on various reliable historical sources, and accounts the finding of the court concerning Mary Bliss Parsons was at best highly suspicious and questionable. A finding that was, according to some historical accounts, rooted not in decisive and tangible evidence or lack of, but rather in direct result of under-the-table and backroom secretive business dealings and political deal-making, conceived and played out between Mary's husband Joseph Parson and his longtime friend, ally and business partner, the powerful and influential magistrate, business owner and proprietor, John Pynchon, that ultimately was able to influence the court's decision. It was during this time that Darius's great-grandmother, the witch Mary Parson, in retaliation for the charges made against her and for the tarnishing of her name and reputation, hexed the colonial government and establishment. I think it's important to note at this point that Darius's 11th great-grandmother was found not guilty of being a witch on 3 separate accounts by the courts, once in 1656, a second time in July 1674, then finally in 1692 during the infamous Salem witch trials. As we have mentioned earlier, as a result of her 1656 hex against the colonial Puritan government, what followed almost immediately after, 7 days after to be exact, was the sudden and unexpected occurrence of a series of misfortunes and tragedies that gripped the colonial government. According to some historical accounts and local legends, it has been suggested that she, the witch Mary Bliss Parsons, cursed the colonial government, declaring that the land would one day rise against its oppressors. And as history clearly shows, it would be over a century later, in 1776, it would seem that the fruit of her curse was realized when the American Revolution erupted, fueled by cries for liberty, equality, and self-determination. And now let us fast forward 329 years after Mary Bliss Parsons cast her imprecation. It was the year 1985, and her 10th great-granddaughter, the mother of Darius Radmanish, herself as her direct ancestor was also a witch, Linda McKim, uttered a nearly identical hex, only this time not in colonial New England but in revolutionary Iran. The parallel is not poetic happenstance, it is lineage and gasping. One woman in 1656, another the 10th great-granddaughter of the first in 1985, separated by centuries, oceans, and cultures, both naming the same enemy, patriarchal tyranny, and both, it seems, foreseeing the same liberation, a people's revolution in Linda's case, a curse sowing the seeds for a revolution ignited by the marginalized, led by women. The dates speak: October 1656, 1985. 2 moments in time, centuries apart, bound by blood, prophecy, witchcraft, and resistance. When we examine the timelines, the synchronicities, the unbroken thread of rebellion from Mary Bliss Parsons to Linda McKim, we see not just family history, but a pattern in the cosmos. A reminder that the fight for freedom is not linear but cyclical, that the whispers of dissent, even when silenced, reverberate through time. Today, as the women of Iran rise, brave, brilliant, unbowed, we see the legacy of Darius's mother, the witch Linda McKim, fulfilled. We see Mary Bliss Parsons' curse fulfilled. We see the power of the witch, not as myth, but as matriarch, as memory, as a movement. And we say with solemn awe, voila, the awakening in Iran today has come. An awakening and revolution forged in magic. And fire and courage of a woman's soul fueled and propelled forth with courage in their hearts, in their unwavering quest, desire and hunger for truth, and the unrelenting will of women who refuse to be subjugated and erased. The revolution in Iran is theirs, and in its fire we hear the voices of Darius's ancestors, his mother the witch from Adair County and 10th great-granddaughter of the infamous witch of the Salem witch trials, Mary Bliss Parsons, whispering, "It was foretold. It is fought for. It shall come to pass, and it shall be earned.